Lesson 4, Changes in Life. Passage 1. An International Love Story.
Aruna was in her last year of college near her home in Malaysia. It was the first day of a new course, and she was in class. Suddenly, she says, I had this awful feeling of being watched. She looked across the room and found that someone was staring at her, an exchange student from Europe. He continued looking at her all through the class. He did it the next day, too, and the next. Finally, she told herself, enough, I'm going to talk to him. That will stop him. So she went and sat down next to him. She discovered that his name was Hervé, and he was French. As soon as we started talking, it was magic, and he was perfect. Aruna and Hervé fell in love, but after a few months, he had to return to France. Soon after that, Aruna graduated and faced the biggest decision of her life. Hervé wanted her to come to Paris. Should she go, or should she try to forget him? Aruna remembers, my parents were in total shock, but the best thing was that they never said no. It was always my choice and my responsibility. This is what they always taught me, to make my own decisions. It was hard for Aruna to think of leaving family, friends, and home. Living in France would be a challenge, too. For one thing, she did not speak French. And it was difficult for me, she says, because I wasn't really sure what to expect. When I met Hervé, he was a student and almost like a tourist. He was happy in Malaysia and he felt comfortable there, but that wasn't real life for him. I was about to meet another Hervé, whom I didn't know, the Hervé who was no longer a student, but a man with a serious job, and a Frenchman in his own country. Aruna decided to go. I had to take the chance. Although there were many differences between us, we were so much alike. I knew that he was the one for me. For Aruna and Hervé, it was the right decision, and now they are happily married. Marriage is not easy, and it's even harder when two people have to deal with differences in language, religion, and culture. Aruna says, the cultural differences were enormous. I come from an Islamic country, although my family is Christian, and many things in France shocked me. The hardest thing, she says, is to understand the way that French people think. Smaller differences in their everyday life caused problems, too. Aruna laughs. We are like night and day. I eat rice 3 times a day, and I don't wear shoes in the house. Also, I want to take care of my husband, like my mother and her mother before her, but that makes Hervé uncomfortable. Even with all the challenges, after 13 years and 1 child together, they are still very much in love.
Passage 2. Life is full of surprises.
Mahmoud Irani teaches at a small U.S. college. He did not expect to end up in the United States, and he did not expect to teach. He grew up in Iran, and he planned to become a doctor. However, as people say, life is full of surprises. Mahmoud was born in Iran near the city of Tehran. In high school, he was an excellent student, the best in his class, and he was planning on a career in medicine. First, he had to take the National University Entrance Exam. He needed to do well on the exam to be accepted by a medical school. Out of 50,000 high school students taking the test, only 1,000 would get the chance to study medicine. Mahmoud missed the score he needed by a few points, which his teachers found very surprising. He took the test again, and again he had to deal with bad news. I was disappointed, he remembers, but I said, "That is my fate." Mahmoud had to make a new plan for his future, so he chose to study English. After college in Tehran, he decided to go to the United States for an advanced degree in English. A few months later, he arrived in Buffalo, New York. He entered an English as a Second Language (ESL) program at the State University there. Mahmoud was one of about 500,000 international students who entered the United States to study that year, but he managed to do something that few others could do. In less than 2 years, he went from studying ESL to teaching it at the same school. While on a visit home, Mahmoud had an interview at a university in Tehran. They offered him a teaching job and he accepted it. Officials at the university made an agreement with him. Mahmoud would return to Buffalo to finish his degree, and they would give him financial support. After he finished, he would come back to teach. So Mahmoud went back to New York feeling great, believing that his future was secure. Things did not turn out as he expected, however. There was a revolution in Iran, which caused great changes in the country. Soon Mahmoud received a letter from his university in Tehran. It said, "We don't need any English teachers." Suddenly his support was gone, and his future was unclear. It was a shock. Mahmoud decided not to give up. He continued studying for his degree, and after much hard work, he reached his goal. Soon he had a good job teaching at St. Michael's College in Vermont. Things have turned out well for Mahmoud. His students at St. Michael's report that he is a great teacher. He is married, and he and his wife, Roya, have 2 children. Roya, who is also from Iran, is a doctor. Mahmoud has always been interested in medicine. "I could go to medical school now," he says, "if I had the patience." He says that he does not plan to make a career change at this stage in his life. However, he adds, "I know that life is full of surprises."
Passage 3. To live as an artist.
In 1981, the artist Vitek Kruta escaped from his country. He left with just one little bag. One little bag with basic things like a toothbrush and underwear, he remembers. He was 19 years old at the time. Vitek's home was in Prague, Czechoslovakia. He loved his country, but he could not stay there because the communist government wanted to put him in jail. The government wanted total control of all art and music, he explains. We had to have art shows in secret. My kind of painting was against the law. The rock music that my band played was against the law. There was no future for me there. So Vitek escaped to Germany. The rest of his family was still in Prague, and after he left, the police made a lot of trouble for his father. In Germany, Vitek first had to learn the language. He spoke Czech and Russian, but not German, so he spent 8 months taking lessons at a language school. Vitek remembers that it was easy for him to understand and read German, but he could not speak it. Then one night, he had a dream. In his dream, he was skiing in the mountains. He met another skier and started talking with him, in German. The following day, he discovered that he could speak much better. Next, Vitek got back to his studies in art. He learned to restore old buildings, such as churches and castles. He spent 10 years doing this kind of work, and then he faced another big change in his life. He got a job offer in the United States. Vitek knew hardly any English, but he did not let that stop him. After all, he had a great deal of experience learning new languages. So he and his wife Lucy decided to make the move. Today, Vitek is a painter, an architect, and much more. He is a man with a lot of energy. He works in his studio, he teaches art classes, and he helps manage an art school. Vitek also likes to get people with different talents and abilities together to do big art projects. Sometimes he has a group work on restoring a building. Sometimes they cover a room with murals, large pictures painted on the walls. Vitek likes to do projects in public places, at schools or in city buildings or in churches, so that anyone can see and enjoy them. He says that projects like these bring art back to the people. Vitek believes that art plays an important role in the world. Art lets people be creative, and the world needs creative people. Vitek explains, if we are not free to be creative, and I'm talking about scientists and mathematicians too, not just artists, then human beings can only copy the past. We cannot move forward.
Passage 4. An Amazing Woman.
Ruth Simmons was born into a very poor family, but she grew up to become the president of a famous university. How did she do it? Hers is an amazing story. The story begins on a farm in Grapeland, Texas, in 1945, the year that Ruth was born. Her parents were farm workers, and she was the youngest of their 12 children. They could not give their children many things, and Ruth never had any toys to play with. For Christmas, she did not receive any presents at all, except a shoebox with an apple, an orange, and some nuts. However, in Grapeland, Ruth was not really aware of being poor. No one else had much either. Then the family moved into the city, to Houston, where people had more money, and being poor was much harder for Ruth. In school, other children laughed at the way she spoke and dressed. Ruth's mother kept the family together. She had no education, but she was very wise, Ruth remembers. She taught us about the real value of being a human being, what mattered and what didn't matter. Ruth's mother did not have big dreams. She just wanted to see her children grow up. This was not a simple wish. At that time, there was segregation in the United States, and life was dangerous for African Americans, especially in the South. Ruth remembers living in fear. If you looked at someone the wrong way, you could be killed. At age 5, Ruth fell in love with school. She was lucky to have some excellent teachers. No one in Ruth's family had much education, but her teachers encouraged her to go to college. They gave her money and even a coat to wear. Ruth knew that college was going to be difficult, but she was brave enough to give it a try. At first, Ruth studied theater, but what kind of career in theater could a young African American woman hope for? She says, "Remember, I grew up in the South. I couldn't even go to theaters." So she studied languages instead. Later, she married, had 2 children, began a teaching career, and became a college administrator. Soon, people began to notice her and respect her abilities. In 1995, Ruth became president of Smith College, a famous U.S. college for women. Ruth was the first African American to lead such a famous college. Suddenly, her story was on TV and in newspapers all over the country. 6 years later, she accepted another challenge. She became the president of Brown University and was the first woman in that role. Ruth believes in the power of education. She once said, "Learning can be the same for a poor farm kid like me as it is for the richest child in the country." It's all about cultivating one's mind, and anybody can do that. So it doesn't matter what color your skin is. It doesn't matter how much money your father has. It doesn't matter what kind of house you live in. Every learner can experience the same thing. As Ruth Simmons will tell you, education can change your life.